Usually when we talk about a massive inheritance, there is just this expectation of total chaos.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we've all heard those nightmare stories, right? A wealthy relative passes away, the will is read, and suddenly siblings who used to, share their deepest secrets are just screaming at each other over who gets the beachfront property or like the antique dining room table.
Yeah, human nature just seems to completely fracture when vast assets are suddenly up for grabs.
Exactly. It gets ugly. But then you step into the world of ancient nation building, and we see this entirely different approach to dividing up what is basically the ultimate estate.
Right.
So as we dive into this ancient masterclass in real estate administration and just unyielding patience, I want to formally welcome you. May God bless your day and the week ahead of you. We are so thrilled you're joining us.
It's going to be a good one.
It really is. Today, our mission in this deep dive is to explore Joshua chapter 14. We're using the rich geographical maps and the historical insights from two distinct study Bibles, the Holman and the NAA.
Yeah, and we are looking at a moment in history that bridges like cold, hard logistics with deeply profound personal conviction.
Because it's a huge transition.
Right. You have a newly conquered land and a newly formed nation trying to figure out how to transition from being, well, a nomadic army into an actual settled society.
And before we get to the emotional core of this chapter, which, by the way, centers on a guy cashing in a 45-year-old IOU, which is just wild.
So good.
Yeah, but before that, we have to understand the sheer logistical nightmare at play here. Let's paint the picture for you listening. You have the land of Canaan.
Which is huge.
Right. It's not a vacant lot. It's a massive, varied territory of mountains, valleys, rivers, and it has just seen some incredibly heavy military campaigning. And you have 12 tribes of Israel, so how do you divide this territory without immediately sparking a civil war among your own people?
Well, you do it by completely removing it from, a free-for-all land grab.
Okay, so no Oklahoma land rush.
Exactly. No racing on horseback with flags. According to the text, the ancient Israelites relied on this highly structured top-down allocation process, and it was overseen by a real heavy-hitting administrative committee.
Who was on the board?
So you have Joshua, who is obviously the supreme military commander.
Right.
Then you have Eleazar the priest, who is the religious successor to Aaron. And finally, you have the recognized heads of the tribal families. They are the ones managing this entire transition.
And based on the maps provided in our sources, they aren't dividing the entire map of the Middle East, right?
No.
They're specifically dividing the land west of the Jordan River. But a really crucial detail here is that they aren't dividing it among all 12 tribes at this point. They're only dealing with 9.5 tribes.
Yeah, that is a really vital piece of the geographical puzzle. Because 2.5 tribes, specifically Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, they had already received their inheritance.
Oh, wait, really? When did that happen?
Before the nation even crossed the Jordan River into Canaan. Moses actually allocated them land on the eastern side, an area that's often called the Transjordan.
Okay.
So now Joshua and Eleazar, they're solely focused on fitting the remaining 9.5 tribes into this newly secured Western territory.
Got it. Which actually brings up a fascinating exception to the rule. The Levites.
Oh, yeah.
This is the priestly tribe, right?
Yeah.
The ones responsible for the religious duties of the whole nation. And they do not get a giant continuous regional territory like Judah or Benjamin.
Right. They are entirely excluded from the regional land lottery.
Which seems kind of harsh at first glance.
It does, but the sources explain that the Levites' inheritance was considered to be God himself and the priesthood.
Wow.
Yeah. So practically speaking, instead of a massive state or province, they are given specific cities scattered throughout the territories of all the other tribes, plus the surrounding pasture lands for their livestock.
Oh, I see. So the strategic design here is to basically have the religious leaders interspersed among the general population rather than like isolated in their own separate little country.
Exactly. You want the priests accessible to the people.
That makes profound sociological sense, but I mean, it creates an immediate mathematical problem.
How so?
Well, if you have 12 original tribes and the Levites are pulled out of the regional land distribution, you're down to 11 land-owning tribes. So how do they maintain that deeply symbolic number of 12 distinct territories?
Right. They solve it through this brilliant administrative adjustment involving the lineage of Joseph.
Okay, lay on me.
So Joseph's descendants are split into two distinct autonomous tribes named after his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim.
Ah, so they double up Joseph's portion.
Exactly. By elevating these two grandsons of Jacob to full tribal status, the math balances out perfectly. The total number of regional territories remains at 12.
The logistics of ancient statecraft are just fascinating. But the actual mechanism they use to draw the borders is where the modern mind might get totally tripped up.
Oh, for sure.
Because this committee of Joshua and Eleazar, they aren't sitting around a wooden table with a topographical map using, a red marker to carve out borders based on who fought the hardest or who bribed the leaders.
Definitely not.
The system they use is the drawing of lots. And the Holman notes mention that Eleazar the priest likely used the Urim and Thummim to determine this. So for you listening, we need to explain what that actually looked like because, frankly, it sounds incredibly mysterious.
It really does, because when we hear drawing lots today, we picture like a random dice roll in a casino, or flipping a coin, or drawing short straws.
Right, it implies blind chance, just pure luck.
Exactly. But the Urim and Thummim were entirely different. Think of them as sacred stones or objects kept inside the breastpiece worn by the high priest. They functioned as a sort of binary communication device with the divine. It was a way to definitively receive a yes, a no, or a specific tribal direction directly from God.
That is wild. The Holman study notes actually reference Proverbs 16.33 here, which explicitly says that the lot is cast into the lap, but every decision is from the Lord.
Precisely. The outcome wasn't considered arbitrary or lucky at all. It was a highly formal mechanism to guarantee divine supervision.
So no one could argue with it.
Exactly. By utilizing the Urim and Thummim, they were essentially transferring the burden of the final decision from human preference to divine decree.
Yeah.
It just completely neutralized the grounds for human jealousy.
Well, wait, hold on. If the sacred stones are literally dictating the divinely mandated zip codes for each tribe, then Joshua and Eleazar are basically glorified spectators. Like, why even have this massive administrative committee standing there in the first place? If God is making the final call on every property line, doesn't all this human bureaucracy, the commander, the priest, the family heads, doesn't it just get in the way?
Well, that tension right there is exactly why the text emphasizes their presence so much.
Okay, how so?
Because while the outcome of the lot is viewed as divinely ordained, the actual acceptance of that outcome requires heavy human administration.
Oh, I see.
Think about it. If you just have one guy in a tent claiming God told him where the borders are, human nature will immediately rebel. People will cry foul.
Oh, yeah. God told you that you get the beachfront and I get the desert. Sure.
Exactly. But by having the highest military authority in Joshua, the highest religious authority in Eleazar, and the highest civil authorities in the family heads, all standing there in public to witness the drawing, you provide absolute, undeniable validation.
It's about transparency.
Transparency and communal accountability. They're there to enforce the divine decree, ensuring that theology successfully translates into peaceful governance. In fact, the NIDA notes highlight this by pointing out the careful literary symmetry in the chapter.
What kind of symmetry?
It begins and ends by emphasizing this exact, rigid administrative framework. It holds the whole narrative together.
So the system is built to be airtight. The machine of national administration is humming along, assigning lands, managing the future of millions of people. But then right in the middle of this grand, sterile process, the whole thing just grinds to a sudden halt.
Yep. Everything pauses.
We transition from national logistics to a deeply personal, flesh and blood narrative. A man steps out of the crowd to cash in a promise made nearly half a century ago.
It is arguably the most striking interruption in the historical texts. You have Caleb, representing the tribe of Judah, and he just approaches Joshua directly at the Israelites' base camp in Gilgal.
And the text calls him Caleb the Kenizzite, which the Kenizzites were a clan that had aligned and assimilated with the tribe of Judah, making Caleb's profound faith even more remarkable. He essentially represents the very best of Judah.
He really does.
And he walks right up to Joshua, the commander-in-chief, and basically says, hey, do you remember what Moses promised me 45 years ago at Kadesh Barnea?
Which is a huge throwback.
Right. For you listening, we really have to rewind 4.5 decades to understand the immense psychological weight of this moment.
Absolutely. So 45 years prior, the nation of Israel was camped at Kadesh Barnea. It was this oasis in the desert acting as a staging ground. Caleb was 40 years old at the time.
Just in his prime.
Right. And Moses sent 12 spies, which included both Caleb and Joshua, to scout out the land of Canaan. Their mission was to assess the terrain, the fortified cities, and the military strength of the
And
inhabitants.
the espionage mission resulted in just an absolute national disaster
A total meltdown.
because 10 of those spies came back utterly terrified. They saw towering fortified cities, they saw literal giants living in the land, and they gave a report that, as the text describes, made the people's hearts melt with fear.
Yeah, the nation just panicked. They completely refused to advance.
But Caleb brought back a radically different report, one that was, quote, as it was in his heart. I mean, he believed they could take the land simply because God had promised it to them.
His faith was unshakable.
Right, and because of that unwavering conviction, Moses swore a solemn oath that the very land Caleb had walked on would be his personal inheritance.
But the fallout of that day was severe for everyone else.
Yeah.
Because the nation succumbed to the fear of those 10 spies, they were condemned to wander in the wilderness for 40 years.
Until that entire doubting generation died off.
Exactly.
I just want to pause for a second and think about the psychological horror of that for Caleb.
It had to be awful.
Imagine doing the right thing, showing immense courage. But because you are outvoted by the cowardice of your peers, you are sentenced to wander in a scorching desert for 4 decades.
Yeah.
He spent 40 years eating manna, walking in circles, and burying his friends, not because of his own failure, but because he was surrounded by fear. The patience required to not become utterly bitter is staggering.
It really is. And this is actually where the Holman notes highlight a beautiful poetic reversal in the language.
I love this part.
Yeah, back at Kadesh Barnea, the unfaithful Israelite spies made their own people's hearts melt with cowardice. But here, in the book of Joshua, as the new generation of Israelites finally crosses into Canaan, the text specifically notes that it is the Canaanites' hearts that melted when they heard about the Israelites' approach.
That is such an incredible contrast.
It's a complete inversion of fear. The terror that the Israelites wrongly held 35 years ago in the desert is now rightly held by their enemies.
Wow.
And Caleb has lived long enough to watch this massive theological shift play out in real time. The NAA study source emphasizes that Caleb isn't just, a historical figure taking up space in the chapter.
What is his role then?
He serves as the theological ideal for the entire book. The text explicitly praises him repeatedly for following the Lord fully.
Okay, but I'm looking at this guy 45 years later, standing in front of Joshua. And I have to ask, is he coming to this administrative committee with a massive chip on his shoulder? Like, is this an I told you so moment directed at everyone who doubted him, or is this purely about claiming a righteous vindication?
Well, if we look closely at how Caleb frames his request, it is undeniably about vindication, but not in a petty, ego-driven way.
Okay, so he's not gloating.
No. He doesn't say, I was the only one who was right and everyone else was a coward, so give me what I'm owed. Instead, he anchors his entire claim in the promise of God delivered through Moses.
Right, he points back to the divine word.
Exactly. He says, the Lord has kept me alive, just as he promised. He is literally offering his own physical survival, making it through 45 grueling years of desert heat and warfare, as living proof of God's perfect track record.
That's a huge perspective shift.
Right. He isn't holding a grudge against the failures of the past. He is setting a standard of faith for the nation's future.
So it's not about his ego at all. It's about proving God's reliability. So having established this incredible 4-decade-long patience, we have to look at what Caleb is actually asking for.
Oh, this is the best part.
Because this is where the story goes from inspiring to just almost absurd. Caleb is 85 years old.
Yeah, 85.
The man has earned a quiet, comfortable retirement. Give him a nice, flat plot of land by the Mediterranean coast, maybe a couple of olive trees, and a gentle ocean breeze.
That's what I would ask for.
Right. But no, he looks at the map of Canaan and points to the hardest, most dangerous battle available.
He specifically requests the mountain of Hebron. And if you reference the geographical maps in our sources, Hebron is situated in this rugged, treacherous, mountainous region in the southern territory of Judah.
So not a beach.
Definitely not. It is high elevation, difficult terrain, and incredibly hard to conquer.
And it's not just the topography that's a nightmare. It's the current residents. Who exactly is living in Hebron?
The Anakim.
The giants.
Yes, these are the very same people who terrified the original 10 spies 45 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The text describes them as great men, warriors of massive stature. And their cities aren't just, a collection of tents. They are heavily fortified strongholds.
Unbelievable.
In fact, Hebron's former name was Kiriath Arba. The study notes explain that this translates to City of Arba, and Arba was historically considered the greatest man among the Anakim.
Oh, wow.
So Caleb is looking at the stronghold of the most intimidating, physically imposing people in the entire land and saying, I want that.
It's like waiting 45 years to finally get the keys to your dream house, only to find out you have to single-handedly evict a heavily armed cartel from the property before you can actually move in.
That is a very accurate comparison.
I mean, it makes no logical sense for an 85-year-old man, but Caleb proudly states to Joshua that at 85 he is just as strong for more, quote, going out and coming in as he was at age 40.
Which is quite the claim.
So I have to ask, is the text telling us this guy has literal biological super strength running through his veins at almost 90 years old? Or is this ancient writer using his age as a metaphor to emphasize unyielding spiritual vitality?
You know, that exact tension is something scholars have debated for centuries, and our sources provide some excellent nuance on it.
Okay, what do they say?
Well, Caleb's confidence is unconditionally rooted in his theology. He tells Joshua, perhaps the Lord will be with me to drive them out, just as the Lord said. His belief in his own strength is derived entirely from his faith in God's backing.
So the spiritual side is definitely there.
Yes, absolutely. However, when it comes to the literal hand-to-hand combat, the NWA notes offer a very practical historical perspective.
What's the perspective?
The notes suggest that while Caleb was given the territory and the responsibility to conquer it, the actual military campaign likely saw him acting as the commander-in-chief of Judah's tribal forces.
Ah, rather than a solitary vanguard swinging a sword on the front lines.
Exactly. In ancient historical narratives, the leader who orchestrates the campaign is often credited directly with the victory of their troops. But, and this is key, we shouldn't diminish the reality of what that means.
Right, he's still there.
Yes. Whether he was fighting on the front lines or commanding the siege from a command tent, the sheer stamina required to lead a military assault through rugged mountains at age 85 against the giants of Hebron, it is staggering. His spiritual strength translated into undeniable physical and leadership endurance.
He just absolutely refused to let 45 years of waiting soften his resolve. He saw the giants when he was 40, and he still wants to take them down at 85.
It's an incredible mindset.
So if Joshua, I'm looking at my oldest friend asking for what basically looks like a suicide mission. I mean, I might be tempted to say no just to protect him. How does Joshua actually process this demand?
Joshua doesn't hesitate or try to talk him down at all. The text tells us that Joshua blesses Caleb and officially grants him Hebron as his inheritance.
He just gives it to him.
He recognizes the righteous validity of the claim and honors the oath that Moses swore decades ago.
And immediately after Joshua grants this incredibly dangerous request, the chapter concludes with one of the most definitive, powerful statements in the entire book. After Caleb receives Hebron, the text simply reads, "And the land had rest from war."
It is such a brilliant structural move by the ancient author.
How so?
The NWA notes synthesize why this matters perfectly. Remember, a massive portion of the book of Joshua is dedicated to recording dry, highly technical lists of land boundaries, tribal borders, and city names.
Right, the logistical nightmare we talked about earlier.
Exactly. By inserting this deeply personal, emotionally charged narrative of Caleb right in the middle, it breaks up those administrative lists. But more importantly, it serves as the theological anchor for everything else the Israelites are doing.
But how does one man's request for a mountain anchor the theology of an entire nation?
Because it completely redefines what the concept of rest actually means in this context.
Oh, that's interesting.
For us, rest usually means the absence of work, right? Sitting on the couch, taking a vacation. But in this ancient text, true rest in the land isn't just about treaties or the absence of active combat. It is intrinsically tied to the kind of unwavering faithfulness and perseverance that Caleb demonstrated.
So rest is an achievement of faith.
Yes. The land experiences rest specifically because the ancient promises of God have finally been brought to completion through the faithful, fearless obedience of people like Caleb. His personal story becomes the template for how the entire nation is supposed to possess their inheritance.
Wow. So what does this ancient masterclass in patience and real estate mean for you listening right now? We live in an era that is relentlessly obsessed with instant gratification.
Oh, entirely.
If a web page takes more than 3 seconds to load, we just abandon it. If a career promotion doesn't happen in 2 years, we feel like we are completely falling behind. But Caleb's story yanks this ancient history right into our modern lives. It forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question.
Yeah.
What does it actually look like to hold on to a conviction or a promise for decades?
Yeah, it challenges our entire modern framework of timing, effort, and reward. Caleb didn't lower his expectations or ask for a discount just because time had passed and the circumstances were difficult.
Exactly. When it comes time to finally step up and claim the reward you've been working toward, do you take the easy way out? Do you ask for the quiet, uncontested path?
Right.
Or do you look at the hardest challenge on your map and tackle it head on? Because you know deep down you have the strength, the experience, and the backing to overcome it. The contrast in this historical account is stark. An entire generation saw the giants and retreated into the desert to die.
Yep.
But Caleb saw the same giants, waited 45 long years, and then demanded their mountain. Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with today. I want you to think about the fortified cities or the giants in your own life right now.
That's a good question.
The obstacles that seem too entrenched, the goals that seem too steep, or the promises that feel like they've been delayed forever. Are you actively looking for a comfortable retreat from those challenges? Or are you willing to step up, regardless of your age, regardless of the past delays or the long desert seasons you've endured, and say, give me this mountain? The inheritance you're seeking might be waiting for you, but the mountain still has to be climbed.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Joshua chapter 14. We hope exploring the logistics of Canaan and the incredible conviction of Caleb brought you some aha moments and some deep encouragement for your own journey. God blesses all the listeners, and we wish you incredibly well as you go about the rest of your week. Keep climbing.